Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of Couple of Nukes. As always, I'm your host, Mr. Whiskey, and my first question isn't to our guest, but actually to you listening. Do you ever feel like every time you try to start something, you're passionate, you've planned it all out, you launch it, and then the world just shuts down or decides to do something that will completely ruin your idea? Today we're going to get into a man who, as I was reading through his bio, every time he tried to do something, it seemed like the world said no. And so we're going to be talking about perseverance, resilience, and most importantly, when things don't go as planned. And that's part of the subtitle of the show, Rebuilding Our Dreams. Because sometimes our initial dream gets skewed by something in the world. How do we rebuild? How do we take what we tried to start and make it something new that can survive this new environment? Life is about adaptation. So we're going to get into that today with our guest here, Mr. Robert Gaines. I've hinted at some of your story. I'd love for you to introduce yourself for us.
Thank you, Mr. Whiskey. I appreciate you having me on. I'm Robert Gaines. I'm a Army veteran and a business school graduate at University of Louisville. I went way late. I waited until after I got out of the military to go through the GI Bill to go to U of L. And as far as businesses, I always say I've been jumping out of burning buildings my whole life. And my luck is so bad that in some cases that actually in the family we call it the Gaines effect. So when I go into something, there's all of these cataclysms, and it's funny now. It wasn't funny 10 years ago, but I think it's funny now because of all of that negative experience. I've learned some really incredible things, and failure is a much better teacher than success. I'm also a fellow podcaster, and last year I wrote my first book, Scintilla, which is about how to come up with business ideas. And I'm currently writing my follow-up book, which is about LinkedIn and networking. So that's me in a nutshell.
Right, and with your luck, you're gonna publish the second book about LinkedIn, and then LinkedIn is gonna revamp all their algorithms, redesign their whole template, and just change everything.
It might even be more serious than that. The whole grid might go down.
Yeah,
It could be.
there's a lot going on. So
I don't play small, man. I shut down entire networks and industries when I get involved.
right, right. They're about to go bankrupt as soon as you publish your book. But no, I want to get into just a linear timeline. I read it online, but I'd love for you to share with us. Like you said, looking back, that 30,000 foot overview, it's like, it's just comical because it's like, what are the chances that every single time it was followed by that? It almost seems like you couldn't make it up. It doesn't seem planned.
People didn't believe it. People didn't believe it, didn't want to believe it. And then when they started to believe it, and no joke, people started to disassociate from me because they thought I had some kind of curse. And that's why they called it the Gaines effect. And that maybe there's a book down the road about that. But yeah, it got to the point people didn't want to be around me because they thought something was following me. It was that crazy. And this isn't in my bio. So I'll start right at the end of my military career. I was at year 8. A lot of people stay in longer after that, and I decided not to. They gave me the option to go to Tripler, which was in Hawaii. It's usually a great deployment. I turned it down because I had just started a recording studio and was networking and bringing bands in, and I was really enjoying it because I love being around creatives. I'm not that creative, but I always like to be around artists. It fuels me, and I like to work with them and help them monetize their art. So that was really rocking. It was really going well, and although it wasn't technically an official business, I could see the potential for it. Well, I come home one day and all my equipment's gone. This was in my house. I had a whole separate room for the studio and completely burglarized. No, I didn't have an alarm system. I was 25. You got to realize that how smart were we at 25? Not very. They broke in. And what I learned about that, just to make this very, very short, is up until that point, I honestly thought the police were there to solve crimes. I thought they were going to do some legwork and help me get my equipment back. They did absolutely nothing. They actually told me to stop calling because I would have tips and and they said, this isn't a murder investigation, buddy. We're not going to do anything. And I was blown away. And then my own insurance company investigated me, which was even stranger because this was the lowest point in my life. I had signed a declination statement. So for people not in the military that don't know, I basically said, this is my last enlistment. I'm not going any further because I had this great thing going on in my life. So in about 90 to 120 days, I went from being an E5 in the Army, married, had a house, recording studio, to having a trash bag full of clothes and a truck payment in 120. And it wasn't drugs. It wasn't that burglary just detonated everything. The timing could not have been more awful. And people don't talk about the mental health part of it, but I was in like a zombie phase for about 3 years after that because it
Right.
would just it so radically changed my life in the blink of an eye. They were at my house for an hour, maybe three cars pulled up and just pulled everything out. I mean, there was almost nothing left. So that was the first one. And then the second one, which is a lot easier to understand, I had worked with a company. This was actually in between there was a company that I worked with that got affected by the dot-com bubble. So our big client was Motorola. And so I started working my way up this company, and they literally went from offering me a promotion to 2 weeks later is when the dot-com bubble, when the market crashed, and then they started firing people and doing cutbacks. Literally 14 days. It just was devastated. Then I moved into the restaurant industry, and beautiful restaurant on the Ohio River overlooking my beautiful hometown of Louisville, Kentucky, and something we were really proud of. I didn't own it, but I was the general manager working with the owner, and we were about 3 months in and we were just getting customers in and we were really excited. And that's when 9/11 happened. And for those of you that don't remember, when 9/11 happened, we didn't know what it was exactly. We didn't know if it was going to we didn't know if it was going to be a ground war. We had no idea of the scope and scale of the attack or what was going to happen next. So everybody hunkered down in their houses in this state of depression for 3 or 4 months. Meanwhile, we were still paying, adjusted for inflation, we were paying $20,000 a month rent for this restaurant because we were on the river. The expenses were still there. We still had payroll. We still had food in the freezer. We had to pay a staff. And we, the cooks and the wait staff, we all just stared at each other for a month and realized nobody's coming. So we had to eat about 3 months of expenses, which made it very difficult. That restaurant experience was so bad that I actually quit drinking because of it. So the drinking got way, way worse. And then after the third time of waking up in the booth inside the restaurant after staying there all night, I was like, I have to make some changes. So yeah, and then I ran an art gallery during the housing crisis. So yeah, whatever I'm doing, whatever I'm into, go in the opposite direction. But I'll leave it at that because I know you have some follow-up questions.
I think it's even like my mom, her birthday is 9/11, not the actual
Oh,
day of, but long before it. And I remember we had gone out to a restaurant one year and it's just empty. Even years and years after 9/11, just a few years ago, even because it's always been a somber day and hopefully it'll stay that way. That's the point. But yeah, I remember we were like the only people in the restaurant and it was kind of eerie. I can imagine right after it happened. And I've done some interviews with firefighters on the show talking
oh
about how it
man,
changed the whole
yeah.
firefighting industry, how it affected so much. And there's a lot of people from my generation, a generation below me, especially, and a generation below that, that to us, Vietnam, 9/11, they're almost fictional stories. Obviously, they're real events, and I've interviewed people from them, but they're so like far away from us. And Vietnam, especially, some of the interviews I've done with Vietnam veterans, it sounds like a entirely different world than where we live now, and it's just you watch these war movies that see and then you hear these stories and it just feels fictional. But I think what I want to get into is when did your drinking start? So you mentioned drinking. Was that during the military as well or strictly afterward?
No, I come from an alcoholic home. Not that genetics, we know now that genetics does play a factor, and I'm of Irish, English, and German ancestry. So the trifecta
Right.
of fame. The only thing I'm missing is Russian. So those are the biggest cultures that really get into their drink. And I remember, I think because my father drank very heavily, very, very. So I grew up around it. I remember dad being passed out and things like that. And I must have been 8 or 9 years old and somebody gave me a sip of a beer at one of dad's friends. And I remember thinking, this is the most awful, horrible. It's like a cigarette to a non-smoker. It's like, get that thing out of here, man.
Right.
And then a friend of mine invited me to help him. I'm from a Catholic neighborhood, so I grew up in Catholic schools, and we were cleaning up after either a Friday fish fry or some event. Nobody was in the church, nobody was in the school, the building. We had access to everything. And we're cleaning up bingo cards and different things like that. And he says, "Hey, you want a beer?" I was 15 at the time. And I was thinking about that nasty beer I had when I was 8. And I said, "Man, I don't know. I don't know." And he gives me a Sterling, which is really terrible, really terrible brand in my opinion. And I choked it down and I thought, "Oh, this is horrible." But I finally got it all down because I didn't want this guy to think I was a wimp. And 15 minutes later, I said, "You got another one?" And man, it never stopped after that. I was by
Wow.
my second one, I was blacking out at 15, which again, that's probably too deep to get into for a podcast, but blackouts there's a lot of red flags. But being 15 and immediately starting to drink so heavy, you're going straight into blackout. That was, yeah. So I had it. I had alcoholism, whatever it's genetic or situational. It got me on that very first time. And I didn't drink the blackout that very first time, but probably my first blackout was maybe a month or two later. So it got me early. It got me very early.
Right, but not the earliest that's been shared on this show, and not the worst. So trust me,
Wow.
this
Yeah.
my show was number one search result for dark subjects on Apple Podcasts at point until Halloween. Halloween bumped me down because all these other stuff came up. But yeah, we've had some conversations on the show, which it just truly amazes me. I grew up in a home with an alcoholic father, and so I never had any interest in alcohol. And honestly, he was an alcoholic who did not want us to end up like him. He was
Mm.
pretty self-aware to that degree, and so he also villainized alcohol. And I saw the bad side of it in the world as well. These high schoolers who they're laughing. I remember there was these girls who got drunk, these cheerleaders and lacrosse players, and one of them had said, "If I ever get too drunk at a party again, just punch me in the face and record it." And so they were passing that video around the school, and she's like proud of it, like, "Haha, it's so much fun." And I'm like, I never saw the appeal to it. Yeah, I've had people on my show who at 12, 13, sometimes 8 years old, just out of curiosity wanted to try alcohol. Like for me, I only saw negative effects of it, so I had no curiosity. I just had caution. Other people they say, well, my mom and dad always have it at a party and everyone's having a good time, and so they get curious and then they start drinking.
Mm.
Most of them throw up or say this is terrible, or they have no self control and they just drink the whole bottle and black out. But yeah, I've interviewed some people who started doing drugs in high school, like bad drugs, like when they're slumped over in a chair
Mm.
with holes in their arms. It's just some crazy stuff that children get into. And I think people forget the reality of that drinking is in high school isn't just like, oh, it's part of the high school experience. It can be it could be the setup and foundation of a very bad path for a lot of people. And I don't think that we should continue to say, oh, this is the high school experience. But that's what mainstream media and all these movies and TV shows and books push, that it's not a party until alcohol. I've had conversations on the show about how it's interesting. Smoking used to be the big thing. Every ad, my parents had a smoking lounge at their high school. You could smoke on airplanes. Now there's no advertisements saying, "Hey, it's a great time if you smoke a cigarette."
Mm.
It's all anti-cigarette smoking. But we've never done that with alcohol. Well, we did, and it went bad. But there's still so much marketing and promotion. Of course, there's don't drink and drive ads, but there's no
Mm.
like advertisement saying, "Hey, these are the negative effects of alcohol. Don't ever drink it. I regret it." Like there's not AA people making advertisements against alcohol. It's just the little caution at the bottom. And I definitely wonder if we'll ever get to that point. But I think it's interesting how we can put industry and marketing before health. But you look at even social media, we've got psychologists designing applications to keep people hooked on them and forget about the real world. I mean, marketing and morality are not synonymous or in line with each other at all. In fact, it's quite the opposite. There's a lot of studies funded by sugar based companies that are promoting stuff for health reasons, and it's not true at all.
Yeah, look at the food pyramid. That's radically changed from when I was a kid. And there were ads when I was really little that said to maybe it might have been back in the 60s before my time, but there were ads that said 2 in 3 doctors think Camel cigarettes are, I mean, those ads, you can dig them up. I mean, it's unreal. I think, and I made a comment on a post about Chef Anthony Bourdain earlier, who, as we know, tragically took his own life. And I was keeping my eye on him because I like food quite a bit and the whole chef culture, and he was traveling. And I was, like most people, I was very intrigued with Anthony Bourdain, and he had been a heroin addict. And but I noticed in these videos he was drinking. Now, I got sober through a 12-step program that you had already mentioned. And we're told complete abstinence. You can't take any intoxicant. If and he and I saw Anthony Bourdain talk about this on camera, saying, "Ah, as long as you don't use your drug of choice, you're okay." And I thought, "Oh, buddy, somebody's
Mm-hmm.
giving you bad advice." And then, of course,
Right.
when he did decide to leave this planet by his own hand, there was alcohol in his system. So when people go to get clean and sober, it means clean as you got to get off of everything. I just broke,
Right.
for people that follow me on social media, I just broke my arm. I cannot move my left arm at all. And I told the doctors at the VA, I said, give me Motrin and what else was it? Like a Tylenol. That's it. I'm not taking anything. And the pain is very intense, but I'm not going to play around. I don't want to end up
Right.
living
No, 100
in a
percent.
dumpster somewhere. But yeah, I think that the drugs and alcohol and all of that, it's going to continue until we start to confront things about human behavior. One of the reasons why I didn't go off the rails completely at 15 is my parents were still together. Now they subsequently did split up and then I really went off the rails. But children of single parent homes, if you look at that data, their drug and alcohol predilections, their chances of being abused, it's through the roof. I mean, kids being raised in single parent homes, it's a war zone out there. The threats, because there's only one. Think about, you've got two bulldogs protecting the chickens versus one. And one parent, as hard as they work, can never protect a child as good as two parents. So, but we're not allowed to talk about things like that. We live in a culture where we like to, make a single parent the greatest thing in the world, but it's tough. It's very tough to protect a child with only one parent in the home.
100%, and it's against divine design. God made two parents for a reason, and there is a balance to everything in this life and creation. So I think that's super important. And going back to the drug of choice, that is a huge justification. I'll give my own father, for example. He was like, "Hey, I'm sober," and that meant I'm not drinking vodka, but I can drink wine and
Mhm.
hard seltzers and other drinks. And I've met people who, like in Korea, they were like, "Oh, it's only soju, it's not whatever, blah blah blah." And that justification game
Yeah.
is leads to a very dangerous path. It 100% does. It really does. And I think even with things like pornography and sexual affairs and all those matters as well. Same with gambling. You can always minimize something and we can always justify something, and that's the issue. But I want to get into more of your life story. So you talked about you left us off at art gallery. So I thought
Yeah,
that was
yeah. So
very cool.
which was great because that's kind of an odd business for an army artillery guy, right? I mean, I was in the medical field the last 5 years, but
Right.
the thing about entrepreneurship is we always look for things that don't exist but should. And a bunch of artists that I was hanging around with at the time were talking about these galleries were ripping them off and not paying them their money. And I thought, oh, this is a pretty easy problem to fix. And I started looking around. I went to a bunch of galleries and I was like, okay, a gallery is like a building with a bunch of lights, and then you put the art on the wall. It really didn't seem like there were a lot of moving parts there to me. And I'm being flippant about it, but really it basically is that simple. So I opened one and I started doing things very, very differently. I didn't know the rules, so I was breaking a lot of rules of art galleries because I didn't go through that formal training. I had no I was hanging stuff wrong. People would come in and tap me on the shoulder. That was like one guy, the curator of the San Antonio Museum of Art. This guy was like the prince of the town as far as art, and he would come to my shows and he's like, Robert, you need to lower this one and don't put those two colors together. They were trying to help me because my stuff was so wrong, but there was something about that vibe that people wanted to come to my gallery because I created this really fun environment, whereas art galleries have this very stiff and
Mm-hmm.
not fun. And this is San Antonio for anybody that's from South Texas. They like to party, man. They like to have a good time. And it's not like I had a bunch of alcohol. I did have wine available for people. I was already sober by then. And we were doing pretty good. And then, of course, we had the housing crisis, and nobody had any money and didn't weren't buying anything. And they especially most people don't wake up in the morning and say, you know what, I want to go out and buy a $5,000 piece of art for my bathroom. So it got
Right.
really tough to sell. And because of that, I had to start putting more energy into a second job. And when I did that, I had to recruit a guy that I worked with to help out with the gallery, to kind of be my right hand. He'd been sober for several years, and I wanted to give this guy a chance, and it looked like a success story, and a lot of people liked him. He relapsed on drugs, and it created so much negative publicity for the gallery. I ultimately ended up having to shut it down because sometimes a brand gets damaged so bad because he created so much ill will. He took money
Mm,
from people, and so I just had to close the doors. But I still have friends from that time. I still have friends from when I had the recording studio. So yeah, I didn't
right.
know if, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say right, and I think that's such a shame. I Most of the stories I've heard where people go into partnership with someone, it
Hmm.
always ends pretty bad.
That's right.
And it's like it's hard because it's hard to do everything on your own by yourself. But at the same time, partnership is such a chance, and here you are trying to do the right thing, but you can't control other people's actions. And so I think that's just a shame. And I was just thinking about what you talking about having friends from that time and even a recording studio time. And I was just thinking about what happened with the whole situation where the police, I've definitely been let down by the police before as well. And I think that's part of the issue with we have these shows like about the police departments and the firefighting departments, and they're so dramatized, but people were like, this is them, and then you call them in real life, and it's terrible response. In fact, my favorite musician, Tom McDonald, he one of his song lyrics was like, "Call the police and order a pizza and see who gets to your house first." It was, and like I really enjoyed that lyric because of some of the things we've seen socially and the. It's not just police officers. There's a lot of different groups of people where it's like, isn't this your job? This is what you're actively getting paid for. This is what my taxes pay for you to do. But there's no sense of responsibility. People have and especially the newer generations, and in general, employment has just become such a lazy culture. I know Starbucks, there was not too long ago a whole controversy with that because Starbucks was implementing a uniform. A set uniform was pretty simple. It was like the green apron and then like black and brown underneath it. And there was all these people, one particular side of politics in general, that was saying it was an attack on their body and their expression and their sexuality and gender because they couldn't dress how they wanted. And as someone who served in the military, as someone who went to private school, but also public school, and also has been a civilian and lived all sides full circle, I mean, it's a job. And jobs come with standards and responsibilities. And people COVID really did a negative impact by letting so many people work from home because I think it really pulled a lot of people toward the direction of laziness, of not standards, of not responsibility, people not wearing pants. Now, I'm not saying I'm not in pajama pants right now. I don't want to be a hypocrite here, but the fact that so many people could get away with stuff, and then going back to that and not wanting to have that culture, and then this idea that identity and your sexuality and your gender is tied to what you're wearing, and that a uniform is oppression. I mean, people were like, the whole outrage against Starbucks was insane, and I couldn't even begin to fathom it. I've never once had a job where they said you have to wear a uniform. I was like, what? Like, that's expected. In fact, if a job says you don't have a uniform, I'm relatively shocked. I mean, it's part of highlighting who is an employee and who is not. In fact, that's one of my issues with going to the mall. You go to a clothing store, you're trying to find someone to help you, but you have pants in this size, and all the employees are just wearing whatever they're wearing. At least you go to Men's Warehouse, they're all wearing their suits. If you go to Boot Barn, they're all wearing the cowboy gear. You go to Victoria's Secret or Francesca's or Forever 21 or these places, you don't know who the hell's working there. Total side tangent, but I think it's just the idea of responsibility, of identity, and people doing their job, and people complaining about pay and responsibility has just become so entitled and lazy.
And the normalization of making a political statement at work. You're there to work.
Right.
Look at how constrained we were to make any political statements when we were in the military. I jokingly said something about unionizing while I was in. I was not serious. I like to stir things up. And people, oh man, I mean, it sucked all the oxygen out of the room. But I do want to go back and answer your question. I want to make sure that this is clear too, that I take responsibility for the burglary of my studio. I didn't have adequate security. I didn't want people to think I'm going to come on here and air my displeasure for the police, which I do have a displeasure for the police for many reasons. So I want to first take accountability
Right.
for the burglary. I didn't bring it on myself, but I did put myself into a position where I was more vulnerable to an attack like that. The police did absolutely nothing. I sat down and wrote all the people that had come through my door because this was at my house and I had a good memory of who had been and who I worked with and who I didn't. So of course the people that had come to view the studio that didn't do business with me, they were the highest on the list. And one of them ended up being a repeated felon after we did some more investigation on my own. For those listening to this, if you have a big burglary, call the police to get the police report and then expect nothing else from them because you're going to need the police report for your insurance company. If you have something really bad happen to yourself or a loved one, this is what you need to do. You need to hire a private investigator. I'm not joking. If somebody gets harmed in your family and you're not sure who, the police file the report and then hire a, an investigator. I probably would, knowing if I could go back and talk to my 25-year-old self, I'd say, hey, call
Right.
a PI because the emotional and financial damage that the loss of all that equipment would have well been worth spending back then. I probably could have spent $500 to have this guy go around and check my list of six suspects, but the police did absolutely nothing. They didn't check prints at the site. There were footprints in the mud and they didn't take any photos and again the guy said to me, this look buddy, this isn't a murder investigation. And just to go on another slight tangent, during part of my time in the insurance industry, I was a fraud investigator and I still sometimes step in and do that kind of work. I can't tell you the number of times a really good investigation was spoiled by bad police work. Really horrible police reports, not showing up at the scene when something happens, incorrect factual statements, not interviewing witnesses at the scene that we could have brought into a court case, that we could have gotten these crooks, these scammers, we could have put them behind bars, or we could have helped the district attorney bring justice to these people. And what I realized is cops are just like any other employee. They're on a shift. They're just trying to get through their 8 hours. And if you happen to have a hit and run at the end of somebody's shift, they're going to put in the minimal amount of effort
Hmm.
they can and then whistle on back home. So the glaze over my eyes of this their heroes. No, I lost it a long time ago. I responded to Hurricane Superstorm Sandy up in New York in 2012, and I was sent into a fire chief's home to assess the damage from the superstorm. And this is, it's not going to get me in trouble to say this because I'm not going to say his name or the company, but he was claiming some things that were damaged that he had previously said were damaged and that had been replaced. So he was committing fraud. This was a very high level New York, the heroes, these guys, they're a hero. And not only that, but he also, prior to the storm coming inland, he got his entire team from the firehouse to come to his house on company time, pack sandbags around his house to make sure his house was okay when the soup, not sandbags for the elderly people in the neighborhood, no, him.
Hmm.
And I just remember going back to my car after evaluating everything, and I had the photos of the stuff that he said that he had. Oh, I definitely had that replaced from the last storm, and just sitting in my car, just in shock because, again, I still had that 9/11. They're all heroes. They all no, they're flawed human beings, and they exhibit the same bad. No, so I'm not saying they're all bad, but they're just like everybody else. You give them an opportunity to not do their job, they're going to not do their job. So I'm sorry, did I answer that question?
No, that's 100% true. I watched a comedian was talking about how he was one of like the entry guards for a military base. And at first it was he had the mindset anyone who comes in here drunk driving, cracking down on them. Like I'm big and strong until the first time he did it near the end of his shift. And then the paperwork kept him past that. And he said, I realized there was so much paperwork and reports and this and that. He goes, I just started letting people go through the base. I don't care if you're drinking, just drive safe. So we've seen it before historically,
That's
and
right.
the worst part is they have the equipment, the forensics knowledge, and money to investigate on a deeper level, and they choose not to. Yet we'll put so much time and effort into other matters, and same with the military. I saw so much time and effort put into the most minuscule, meaningless things, and then you have these big issues going on, and they leave it. And I've seen military investigations and court cases and mass hearings where they don't even bother to interview witnesses because, oh, that would take too much time, or, oh, that person transferred to a different ship. We don't feel like going and getting a statement. It's just absolutely ridiculous. Same with the court system. So I agree. I think a private investigator, and that comes down to what do you value more? Do you want to try and believe for something to happen, or do you want to pay and see results? So it's a shame, and to me, it's a shame living in this fallen world that you have to have security for your house. Ideally, you shouldn't have to have any security, but unfortunately, that's not the world we live in. And so, you talked about your military service, and then I just want to get a greater understanding of why did you join, and what did you do while you were in?
Yeah, yeah. I joined August 30th of 1990, and the ground war was started in November something, I think, or December something. And I don't mean my family, this was just an independent opinion I came to from watching the TV. At the time, there was a lot of, now we realize, propaganda that the Iraqi Republican Guard was the third, I think, third largest standing army and the fourth best I mean, they really put them up as this super foe. And for those that don't remember, Iraq had invaded Kuwait, a sovereign country, and we were going to go in there and help the Kuwaitis. So of course, TV propaganda went into full spin that, and being from the Catholic tradition, there was a biblical element to it too, that this guy could be the guy. He could be the ultimate enemy because he's from that area of the world, right? He's from
Right.
ancient. So there was that, and I thought, this is the battle. This is the battle of the millennia, of the century, potentially. That's what I was telling myself. Again, give me a break. This is a 18, 19-year-old kid's mentality. So judge me as the child that I was. But I said, I need to be part of this. This is a righteous battle. And again, I was just being informed from the TV. I got a lot of resistance from my high school. They have a high college bound rate, so it was kind of a college preparatory. They begged me not to go in the military. My parents weren't hot on the idea. I don't think really anybody was in my corner, but I joined, and joined artillery too. So you would have thought, if you're in artillery, you're absolutely going to be sent to the desert. And unfortunately, the weapon that I picked, which is funny because your channel's a couple of nukes, I was a Lance missile crew member. At that time, it was the only nuclear capable weapon that the Army had. And I sat watching nukes in a bunker in Germany while the war was going on. So I watched CNN and I watched it all go on from TV. So I never deployed. I never got to go over. Germany was as close as we got. And of course, a lot of us were there because we wanted to fight and we were frustrated about it. And we asked the commander, like, why aren't we going? We're the only weapon system not over there. Everybody else is there. The gun bunnies, the tube artillery guys, they're all there. Why aren't we getting some action, boss? And they said that it was the optics, the fact that we were nuclear capable. We didn't want to, quote unquote, send the wrong message to the Middle East. Now you got to realize this is pre 9/11 thinking. We were still worried about what they thought about us over there, which
Right.
after 9/11, obviously that very much changed. And you still see that mentality today where if there's outrage over there, there's very little concern by us. We're going to protect ourselves and our interest for better or for worse. But yeah, I was sold on that we were freedom fighters and we were going to help the Kuwaitis out, which we did. The soldiers that did go, they did get a great job. They pushed the Iraqis out of there. And right as we were, well, not me, but the people that went, right as they were about to kind of terminate Saddam Hussein's command, they were told to stand down. So Colin Powell was told, we're not empire building. We're not going to go into Iraq. We're just going to stop here. The Kuwaiti people have been freed and we're good. And then, of course, after 9/11, we went to Afghanistan first, and then we went to Iraq and we finished, quote unquote, finished the job. So yeah, and then so after 3 years of being in that weapon system and not being deployed, they got rid of our weapon system because it was replaced by multi-launch rocket system, or MLRS, which was the hot new weapon on the block, and ours was designed in the 70s. So they got rid of us. So I was unemployed in the Army. I had no MOS for a while there, and they said, "I'll
Wow.
show you how smart I was as a kid." They said, "What?" They said, "What kind of job do you want to transfer into?" And I said, "Well, what else involves radiation?" Because ours was nuclear. That's what a genius. I laugh when I think about that
Right,
stupid kid
right.
that made that decision. But they put me in radiology. So I worked at Brooke Army Medical Center in radiology. I worked in the
Not the kind of radiation work you wanted to
totally
do.
different radiation. Yeah. And I'll tell you, to be a
Combat radiation.
yes. Oh, I was a fish
Don't
out of
know.
water. I was smoking and drinking and F this and F that and working in a hospital. So they had to sit me down and acculturate me. They were like, Sergeant Gaines, I was a sergeant at that time, and they were like, Sergeant Gaines, you can't scratch your crotch in front of everybody right in the middle of the floor. Because I was used to only working with guys, and now I'm in a hospital environment. So
Right.
yeah, I was a misfit, and I stayed in that for about 5 years. I will tell you though, as much negativity as there is to my story, the professionals that I worked with at Brooke Army Medical Center, the doctors, the nurses, the physician's assistants, they were dynamite. And Brooke Army Medical Center also took civilian trauma. We were the only one of two level one trauma centers in the whole city, seventh or eighth largest city. So I've seen every way a person can be harmed. And they put people back together that you would just think there's no way. And they had a prenatal ward where these little babies would come in. And I mean, I was like, how are you going to get an IV into this little baby? I mean, a baby this slightly larger than my thumb, and they get them and they survive. And yeah, I don't know. I'm sure Brooke Army Medical Center is still doing great work, but in the late 90s, oh man, Institute of Surgical Research, NICU, amazing work. Amazing, amazing. Just can't say enough great about those people. The leadership was a little wonky, but the job itself and the people that dedicated themselves to helping people at that hospital, dynamite, best of the best.
Opposite of what I saw firsthand in the Navy and the horror stories that my shipmates have gone through and retold. So glad to hear that. It seems like the Army medical system is much better than the Navy, but I won't say that in a full general sense because I'm sure there's plenty of Army guys who would instantly call me up and say, "Listen, I'll tell you what happened to me." you
Yeah.
know.
Well, there were a lot of eyes on that hospital in particular. I'll tell you, the person that I served under, the sergeant in charge of the radiology department, complete waste of space. And the guy before him, complete waste of space. I mean the medical professionals, the ones actually doing the surgeries they were awesome. I'm not a bureaucratic guy. I just wanted to do my shift, 8, 10, 12 hour, whatever you need from me, but I don't want to go have a meeting about it. And those
Right.
guys, the bureaucrats, I hated them and they hated me. And there and there was no, we didn't hide it very well. So yeah, the last 5 years was pretty rough psychologically because I always got the worst shifts. I was punished because I was very outspoken about the lack of quality to the management. But I thought, you know what? As long as I'm making the patients happy and I'm taking care of my fellow vets and the civilian trauma, I got great marks on that. So the reviews were good as far as my patient care, but I definitely didn't play nice with the bureaucrats.
So did you find transitioning into the civilian world to be difficult? Because I mean, that's usually a difficult transition. In your case, you kind of went into entrepreneurism and had the whole weird situation. So I feel like your transition was terrible on top of terrible, but also a bit better because you're an entrepreneur, so you're not in as many environments where you have to be so I suppose civilian like where you can still be your military self. So how did you find that whole transition?
Sure, without going too deep into it, because of my father's alcoholism and what I was exposed to as a kid, and even with the Catholic Church, because we had priests telling us crazy things that I realize now aren't true. So I didn't have very much respect for leadership in general. in any phase of my life. And I got that from a very early age. So if people get diagnosed with this, what is this, oppositional defiant disorder, I don't know if I have that, but I
Yeah.
really don't. I like leadership if it's competent. But if you don't know your job, you're going to have a hard time managing me
Should have
because
never
I'm
joined the
going to,
military.
that's right. So it was tough. And I bucked up against most of the, usually the managers, the leadership above my direct manager usually liked me because they knew my heart was in the right place and that I was very mission oriented and I had that structure. But the guy I worked for is usually a guy was always terrible. And it was hard to deal with. So I just tried to pour my joy and get my joy out of doing the job because that was the part that I like to clock in, get my boots on and start taking care of patients or doing the artillery. The transition was very difficult because in my heart of hearts, I thought I really want to run something myself, like in the studio. When I had that right before I got out, there were a few bands that I chose not to work with. And I thought, wow, this is amazing. Business owners, we have the ultimate decision. If we don't like a customer, we don't have to do business with them. So that's why entrepreneurship was this magnetic draw because there was no hierarchy. There was nobody telling Robert Gaines what to do. And to my young mind, that was very, even at the gallery, I did things my way for better, for worse. And I think that's a great way to live as long as you're honest about your failings, because when you're 100% in charge, you're also 100% at fault. Unless a meteor just comes out of the sky and it's just some random event.
Right. With
Me,
your luck is probable.
that's right. Yeah, yeah, I got to be careful. Absolutely. Well, even the gallery, the kid relapsing on drugs, my heart was in the right place, and he was when I entrusted him with kind of co-running the gallery, he was in good shape, good condition. He didn't relapse until afterwards. But where I did go wrong, and this is a great lesson for any entrepreneur, even an employee, that there's a big difference between delegation, which is good leadership. So there, a lot of the bad leaders you and I served under, they didn't know how to delegate. They abdicated and then they punished us with because of their unclear commands, right? Does that sound very familiar? You're not sure what you're supposed to
100%.
do and then you get punished. Yeah. So, that's the problem. That's the sign of bad leadership. And in that position, I couldn't teach him what I didn't know. So I abdicated power to him. I didn't delegate because I had never been taught that. I understand it now. And anybody who watches my podcast, every other episode, I talk about Dan Martell's Buy Back Your Time. The formula's in there. And when I read that book right after it came out, the end of 2023, I could barely sleep for 3 days. I thought, if I had known this 20 years ago, everything would be different. But I'm grateful that I did finally learn it. So don't beat yourself up for what you didn't know when you were 20. Just as long as you're constantly learning,
Right.
just don't make that same mistake twice. That's when you really should kick yourself if you keep finding yourself in the same situation. So I keep running into new challenges, terror attacks, down markets, the stock market keeps so and now with like what happened with the studio, I have vinyl covered steel doors on my house now. I mean, you'd have to have a tank to get in here. Now, why do I do that? Because of the lesson that I learned in 1998. So every aspect of what I'm doing, from entrepreneurship to my personal interactions with people, is an evolution of those lessons that I've learned. So I don't think you're going to see me make any of those mistakes twice. I'm going to make new mistakes and I'm going to learn from them. But yeah, the transition to the civilian world was very, very tough because I got myself into another situation where the leadership was very poor. I did have some bright spots. I worked as a marketing consultant in there. I was doing a whole bunch of things. I was wearing a lot of different hats, struggling to survive. And ultimately, that's when I went back to college at, I think, 31 or 32, which was right about when I got sober. So that was the really big part of the story. And I'll tell you, the first 3 years of my sobriety sucked. Most people aren't honest about that, especially people that go through the 12-step program like I did. The first 3 years was horrible. The big thing that changed, that revolutionized everything, is I stopped blaming other people. But it took
Mm.
me 3 years of sobriety to even begin to start personal accountability. I know a lot of people who are sober, and you and I talked about that, people that don't drink, but they still have all of these the 12-step program would call it defects of character because they didn't work on themselves. You have to do more than just not drink. You have to pursue self-improvement. And when I really started to look at my role in the failures in my life, the gains effect started to go away, started to subside a little bit because I had a hand in every one of those cataclysms. Now, the 9/11, I really couldn't have, that was a bolt from the blue. There was nothing. We were doing our best, and then something completely outside of our control happened, and we did our best to deal with it. But yeah, it wasn't a smooth transition out of the military. I do like working inside of structure to this day. So I have rituals and I have an SOP and I have guidelines that I follow. And so I've created my own basically regimented environment for my life.
And that's what I want to focus on is between the art gallery and now,
Mhm.
that segment of your life leading up to what you're doing now.
Sure. So at that point, when the gallery started to fall apart, I was also transit my day job because I usually through these I had a day job and I was working as a marketing director for a career school. And that was going good, but they were very jealous of, and I mean this sincerely because they had expressed it to other people. They were very jealous about what was happening with the gallery. I ended up on TV. I was back when there were newspapers. I was in the newspaper a bunch of times. And that really started to rub them wrong, even though I really liked them and they liked me. They liked the work that I was doing. But I got offered a much larger opportunity to be the marketing director over three different companies. So unfortunately, and this was a mistake, I chased the glory. I left this family business where I was very comfortable at and I was the marketing director for a career school. I became the marketing director for a sign company, basically a PR company, and let's see, what else were they into at the time? It'll come to me. Anyway, it was a big shot role. I thought it was a big step up. And we once I was in there, I realized very quickly we weren't aligned at all as far as what our visions were and what we wanted to do. And they saw what I did with the gallery. They didn't really see what I did with the career school, but they saw how I was able to go from opening a business that nobody had heard of to having the place completely packed. And I was getting all this splashy PR, and they wanted that for their company. But the biggest part was a sign company. And how excited can you get over a sign company? You have to make it's an art gallery and come and drink some wine and have some, and we got a jazz band. I can sex that up and make people want to go to it. A sign company was a tougher sell. So I wanted to push them in this more exciting direction, and the owner wasn't that type of person. So I left that, and then and this was the first time I ever really made any financial success in my life, I became an insurance adjuster. And I was living in Texas. I was still in South Texas at the time. And the year that I got into it, which we're going to fast forward a little bit, now we're into 2011, I got picked up to start doing storm work. So when the hail would fall, I would drive around Texas and other states looking at cars, writing estimates. And since it was a temp job, it was contract, the money was really good. There was per diem and yeah, and I did that all the way, technically, really up until this last year. I've also was a staff insurance adjuster when I did fraud. I won't say the company's name, but it's the largest auto insurance company in the United States, and I investigated fraud. The only reason why I don't mention the company is it allows me to tell stories about my time there if you ask questions. So but that's it. Yeah. So I made my bones. The money, I never saw really any money until I was in my 40s. So I was sober all that time, struggling all of that time. And then the insurance industry has been very good for me. But AI and automation is wiping out all of those opportunities. So I'm in a career transition once again. Now I'm pivoting as a podcaster, author, and we'll all wait and see how that works out.
Right. So, how have you found your podcasting journey so far? What was kind of the inspiration behind that, and how long have you been running it?
Great question. The idea was just to start a mastermind group, me and a bunch of other business owners. We liked each other's company first and foremost. And on the heels of the pandemic, it was kind of hard to link up. And I said, well, let's formalize this. Let's make it like an organization. Once I did that, I thought, well, I need to create content for this group, have some videos so that new members would know what we're about. So I started buying video equipment and doing different things. And I looked around at the equipment and I thought, this is the exact same stuff that they use for a podcast. So let me start a podcast. And then once that got going, it then led to the book. And it just kept growing and growing and growing and growing. The mastermind group never took off. People want to be, I always say people are willing to pay for to take away pain or to give pleasure. That's where the big money is. You said it earlier in this conversation, the TikTok, and they want to look at Brazilian butt models. And I'm talking about business all day. I'm talking about economics. You want to put somebody asleep at a cocktail party, start talking about economics and commodities and gold and inflation. They'll absolutely, everybody will just pass out from boredom. So it's been very difficult to grow that channel because I'm not a Brazilian model at the beach in a bikini. So I'm fighting against this. I'm competing against people's attention for these much less serious things. But
100%.
but I still feel like it's an important thing to get the information out there. I'm now releasing the second edition of the book that I first wrote, Scintilla. The reason why I did that is I've grown so much as a writer that I'm revising that first book. I think the first edition was okay, but after a year and a half of solid writing every day, I have a lot more skill. So I want to increase the quality of that book, and that should be out maybe in the next 2 or 3 weeks. I've just had the cover redesigned for that, and I'm halfway through my manuscript for my second book, which is about LinkedIn and general networking. But to answer your question, the podcast, we've had moments where things went, I guess, viral on a very low level. But as far as subscribers, it's been very, very tough. We're not an entertainment channel. And I will not put myself in a thumbnail making a bunch of silly faces. I'm not going to be a clown. Mr. Beast, he can do all, look at him. But he opens his mouth and he looks like, I'll give you an example. I just saw an article yesterday about Haley, the Haktua girl.
Haley Wilson.
And yeah, she was streaming the other day, live streaming, and she had 9 viewers. 9.
Mhm.
And it's tough for me to look at people like that at the height of their fame. And then I look at my subscriber count, which is less than 200, by the way. And I'm like, man, if I could get 1% of that. So I do sit back and scowl at these people that go viral. But look at where she's at now. And I don't wish harm on anybody, but she could have went in a very serious direction and delivered a lot of value and pivoted, but she kind of stayed in that mark, and now she's at the end of that career. That's it for her. So it worked out, I guess, the way it was supposed to. So I'd much rather be serious on camera and actually be trying to help people with a low viewer count than to blow up and go super viral for something really silly. And that's actually my only fear. I don't fear very much, but I fear going viral for the wrong reason. Like somebody misunderstands something I say in this interview and they're like, oh, he's a Nazi, or oh, and then that becomes the story.
Right.
And then now I'm fighting a PR nightmare. As
That's
a
why
matter
I'm
of
gonna
fact,
name the title of this episode "Interviewing a Nazi." No, but I feel you on a lot of that. It
God,
resonates deeply with me and a lot of people in my industry because I get frustrated too. I have content on suicide prevention, addiction recovery, self-improvement, mental health, military matters, whatever it is of great value, and it gets a low view count, low share count. Meanwhile, I saw a friend show me a TikTok once because I don't support TikTok. I don't use TikTok, but a friend showed me a reel from it of a gentleman who touches anthills and rates them on their softness and texture and stuff. Over 1 million likes. I look at some truly degenerative, sexual, hateful, racist content online, and that's what sells. That's what trends. I know people who have businesses. For example, there was a gentleman who does veteran clothing and donates some of the money to veterans, pivoted into sexualizing women to sell his clothing. Like he'll have trucker hats on women in thongs to sell the trucker hat for the veterans. And so, like, there's people who will do that. It's definitely crossed my mind, make a couple of Nukes bikini on a not a Brazilian model, but a different type of model. And sure, I mean, it could probably push something, but my thing is selling out sexualization. Actually, it's a thing that I noticed the other day with some of the women who have been on my show or work in my industry turning to beautifying themselves or sexualizing themselves to push their content. And it's a shame because some of them have really good, wholesome content about business, about health, about fitness, whatever it is. But now they're trying to conform to the world rather than the renewing of their mind. So it's a shame. And it's frustrating, especially with AI, cat videos getting more likes than my content. And the attention span decrease has been painful. I had a YouTube expert say, "Well, Mr. Whiskey, you got to get your shorts time down to like 20 seconds max." And it's like, how do I get a clip of a conversation like the conversation you and I have had today and get 20 seconds of super impact or 20 seconds of content or humor that's enough for them to go watch the whole interview for an hour? It's just ridiculous, the decreasing time span. And social media realized that and they added the fast forward function just to get people to continue to consume long social media's long form, which is a minute to 3 minutes, whereas long form is much longer than that. But it's so frustrating to see these podcasts like Haley Welch, yeah, the Hawk Tuah girl. She had, I believe, it was Mark Cuban on her podcast, pitching business ideas to him about the Hawk Tuah pickle. It's ridiculous. I think I have a great show. Obviously, I'm biased, but it would be awesome to have one of the sharks from Shark Tank come on my podcast. But I'm not on their radar because I'm not viral for making a
Sure.
blowjob joke, and it's ridiculous what
And it's a
the
catch
big
22,
famous.
right? Sorry, go ahead.
No, no, no. Go ahead.
It's a catch 22 because, and I said this in a video, I think it's going to go up tonight, but I said, I had an opportunity to get the actor Eric Roberts on my channel, Julia Roberts' brother, great actor. He was in The Dark Knight, a bunch of other really great stuff. I mean, he's a B-lister, but he's a great actor. And a lot of people know him. And I was in contact with somebody on his team, and then they just stopped contacting. And I know what happened. They went to my channel because he was doing a book tour, so he was doing a lot of press with smaller podcasters, not as small as me. But I thought, maybe I got a shot. I even offered him some money between me, you, and your audience. I said, hey, here's some money. And but anyway, they didn't respond because what they do, they looked at my subscriber count and they thought, okay, how many books can we sell going to this guy's thing? So they're making a business and monetary decision, and I understand that. So the way out of this is you can either give into the algorithm, and I've just recently started a subscription to vidIQ, and it analyzes my thumbnails and my titles. And really, honestly, Mr. Whiskey, this program is pushing me in directions that I don't like. I'll write an honest title about what it is, and it'll make the most ridiculous suggestion. And I'm like, that's not really what this video is about.
Well, and I think vidIQ, here's what I'll say, because
Sure,
I've
sure.
also had vidIQ. If you are a podcaster, vidIQ is not for you. It is for YouTubers. I did customized thumbnails for every podcast episode. It was time consuming. It took a lot more time
Yes,
than you would
yes.
think, and it had no results. I found that the best way as a podcast, and this is my personal opinion,
Mhm.
now I have every podcast thumbnail. It's a black border, white background, me and the guest. And it's kind of like Steve Bartlett, Diary of a CEO. He has a pretty simple thumbnail design too. It's a picture of him and the guest, and then something in the middle. It's kind of similar to that. I have found people really podcast consumption on YouTube when it is not an in-person recording like Joe Rogan's podcast, very low consumption. It's not zero,
Very good
but it's very low.
observation.
Buzzsprout, which is one of the largest hosting platforms for having a podcast, I went to some of their talks because they're pretty local to me. They shared that one of their videos that had like the whole almost like a 90% retention rate for that episode, audio only. That same video had a 2 minute retention rate on YouTube.
Phew.
People just
Wow.
really same exact content. One of their most popular episodes, great consumption. Video just doesn't do it. And I think that so many podcasters get wrapped up in the thumbnails, it is just a waste of time. What I have found is if people are looking for a podcast and you have a clear copy paste podcast thumbnail for your show, it just aligns better with your branding. It makes it more findable when you're searching on the internet. So I would caution people from getting too much into it, as you're sharing here now, that it pushes you in a YouTuber direction. We're not YouTubers. We don't make video game content. We don't make videos. That stuff is great. Like you said, the big reaction face and the background. It's just not worth it. And it's hard as a podcaster. I tried making it catchy, clicky, but it's hard to do so when you have a conversation. You have to exaggerate. I'd have to have you and me sitting in artillery field with our heads like what, that to be not too exaggeratory. Like hey, he was an artillery guy, but we were never in Kuwait together. But like we talked about it, so that's what the thumbnail can be. And honestly, when you do that, you can also hurt yourself a lot. People say, hey, this guy never sat in Kuwait. This was a clickbait. And once you get labeled as clickbait, it doesn't matter how many of your videos you have. If all it takes is one bad representation, that whole podcast is done.
That's right. A lot of clicks and they immediately click off whether you've got to deliver on that promise. I just did a short the other day that I, put stuff out there and you're like, this is gonna kill because it was very kind of similar to another short that did really, really well. And I usually have pretty low hopes for shorts, but I spent 40 minutes on this short, and the short is maybe 40 seconds. So I spent a lot of time. I was using Descript and music, and I was I was
Right.
I was moving the music to the beat of the guest talking. And so I'm in my mind, I'm like Hans Zimmer and Interstellar. I've got the orchestra and
Right,
doing the
right.
beats and six views, six views. And I'm very proud of that short, and I'm proud of that episode. 6 views,
And it's
40
not even the
minutes of my
content
time.
itself, it's the words, it's the title, it's the audience that YouTube pushes it out to. And I recently interviewed professional comedian Danny Johnson, and he and I both perform comedy, and we spoke about something you mentioned, which is the same for content as it is for comedy. We always had that joke that we think is going to be killer. Like, I can't wait to tell this joke. This is my favorite joke. And it's just like a silent audience or like a few chuckles. And then this
Oh,
joke that you think is, I just like threw that in there. People love it. And it's the same with YouTube Shorts. I love seeing my statistics for that because I could even tell you a pattern. I post about two shorts a day. And some of them have 1,000 views, some of them have 600 views, some of them have three. I can tell you words like sexual addiction, pornography addiction, gambling addiction, it does not perform well. Anything that is about rape prevention, sexual assault, domestic violence prevention does not perform well on YouTube Shorts. If I had the word faith, God, or Jesus in there, it is guaranteed to get dislikes.
really?
Any faith-based short I put out always gets at least one dislike instantly. Within 5 minutes of it being posted, it will get attacked by the enemy within
That's a
instant.
bot. That's guaranteed, paid from,
It's I'm just
yeah,
telling you, it's
paid
just
opposition.
unbelievable for real. And then you got other stuff like I posted the one joke from my comedy skit as a short yesterday, one of my most popular shorts of all time within 24 hours. And it was just about me coming on stage and say, "Hey, feel free to laugh until you pass out because I am military qualified to perform CPR on women only. Their rule, not mine. They said I'd have to join the Navy if I want to kiss men, and that's all it is. It's like a 20-second clip making fun of the Navy and military stuff, and like people loved it.
I
And I have
saw that.
found
That was the cruise ship video, right?
yes,
Yeah,
yes,
yeah.
and I
When I
have
saw
found.
that, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say, my one of my other most popular shorts was me talking about. Here's some military BS for you. Saturday morning, emergency muster, emergency muster. Every person on the base right now. We got people driving in from out of state because it's the weekend. We go 10 o'clock. We muster in the school building. Surprise shave check. So I shared that short, and I tell you, it was super popular because every person who had served in the military had some kind of BS story. And this was back when the comment section was all people being like, "Man, my base pulled some." So sometimes it is about that humor and relatability, but then you have times where I've posted stuff like, "Here's a great life lesson." It's just like, so it really is. But I want to say something positive about it, which is my mindset, and this hard mindset to have is not chasing numbers, but having almost a gambler's mindset, this optimistic view that you never know when the right person is going to view it. I've had people tell me a story. Man, I had all these book signings at Barnes and Noble's, Books a Million. No one showed up, and then this one time someone showed up and he was a movie director, and now they're making my book a movie. So you never know who you're going to meet. I've had people listen to the podcast, and it might not be a lot of people, and then suddenly, boom, this person says you changed my life. So it's more about retention, and I love the analogy. Would you rather have a million clients and half of them never show up again, or you've got 10 clients that come back every week
That's
and
right.
pay a low amount every single week? It's about retention and engagement more than it is numbers. More numbers can lead to more engagement or not. And I think it's hard with whatever endeavor you're doing to not focus on those numbers, but it's about the value behind the numbers.
And I think your strategy about thumbnails is spot on, by the way. I need to throw that in there. I started thinking about that in terms of how it how it may also affect the social media, how many people that you're connected to. Because I'm much my quote unquote stuff now that my arm is broke, I'm not writing nearly as much, but the stuff that I was writing on LinkedIn, just advice, general stuff, that actually did very well. I get more responses and reactions to things I write on LinkedIn than anything on average than anything I do on YouTube. So really it seems like, and I was not very active until recently on LinkedIn, and I was like, oh,
It's about alignment.
maybe I found a home. But in with that, where you have the 1,000 true fans that gets talked about a lot in podcasts. I have a couple of people, and I bring them up during my podcast and when I'm guest and others. There's a guy named Mike Dry who wrote a nice, a great book for kids about baseball, very wholesome, very lessons oriented. He's trying to get his book out there. But no matter what I do, if I go live, if I shoot he clicks like, he shares, I mean, he's a soldier. He's a battle buddy all the way. Robert Lane, who he's also a member of Podmatch. He's been on some interview shows as well. He's a audiobook coach. Great guy. I interviewed him on my channel. Anytime I go live, I post anything he likes, he shares it. And obviously I reciprocate. And I've got a few other friends that are in there most of the time. And of course, I'm sharing their stuff too. All I really need is about maybe 36 of those people. I figure 3 dozen of those people. So that's really, I've got it down to that. If I had 36 people that just were cheerleaders for what I'm trying to do, I don't need thousands of people. And plus, what am I doing now? I'm just trying to sell a book. I want people to go to Amazon and buy Scintilla. So I'm a low ticket guy. I don't have a course. I'm not going to get you on the phone and work you up a value ladder to hit you with a $5,000 one-on-one. I'm not
Right.
that guy, man. That's Grant Cardone. That's his. I'm from the opposite universe of Grant Cardone. I want you to have this book. If you get value out of it, great. If you didn't, you only wasted $20 instead of the thousands I've wasted on
And you could
gurus
just
and
regift it to
coaches.
someone.
That's right. Yeah, that's right.
Your
Yeah, yeah.
mother-in-law.
But I honestly think anybody that doesn't know what to start, what to do, that book answers that question. So if somebody's working in a cubicle, working 9 to 5, and they're like, I want to escape, but I just don't know what it is I want to do. I think if you go through that book, it answers that question. And whether you're a meditator and you're into yoga, there's kind of stuff about that right-brained unlocking that type of creativity because I worked with all of those artists and I understand the mechanics of what goes on in their mind. And then there's solid science in there too. I mean, there's psychological studies and so forth. But if you're like me, more of a data guy, then there's a lot of great left brain exercises in there. But that's it. That's my big scam is I'm just trying to get somebody to spend, depending on whether it's audiobook or Kent, $15 to $20. That's it. I don't have an upsell. I'm not trying to get you to pay me thousands to do whatever. My pitch is very simple. And for guys like us, you and I, as podcasters, the road is a lot tougher for us. And because I'm not out there telling people, just give me 5 grand, I'll change your life, it's going to be a harder road for me. And I understand that. But I'm not going to be a Haley Welch. I'm not going to blow up and then burn out. I'm going to grow slowly. And if I don't do that, then I'll do something else. I'll go back to washing dishes like I was between jobs many, many years ago. I'm not too proud to do anything. So I'll be fine. It's the other people that can't pivot, that aren't willing to go wash dishes or do things to survive. Those are the ones I worry about. I can tell you, brother, I'll be all right.
Well, podcasting with one arm is easier than washing dishes with one arm. I will say that. I will say
Very
that.
true. Yeah, you should see my sink. Oh man. Yeah.
Yeah. Unless you have a dishwasher, because then you can't transfer with one hand. But I get flack for this. Makes dating women hard because they're like, why do you wash the dishes before you put them in the dishwasher? Because the dishwasher doesn't do a good enough job
That's true.
when you buy the $1 dish soap box from Kroger's. So I need to do a little prep work to
That's
save
right.
money. But yeah, I'm moving back to the dish pods because this I got this powder box and it just does it leaves like a white residue on all of
Yep.
my dishes and I'm
Yeah.
like now I gotta hand wash them again because now there's this like residue on them. So I digress. But what would you say? We've gone over your life, started out linear, went back, went forward, went back. So a bit of slaughterhouse fiving here. But through all of that, we got the idea that you've lived a lot of life. You've had a lot of setbacks, a lot of push forward. You're in a new phase of your life, moving forward, figuring things out. What has been the ultimate life lesson that you've cultivated from all of that? I know you've shared a little bit here and there along the way, but what would be the one main one that has really stuck with you and that you're implementing even to this day?
It's so easy just to sound like a Nike commercial and say, just do it. It is just that, but I know your audience won't accept that because it's too simplistic. But at the very minimum, I would say the thing that I've learned is find someone who is one step further down the road from where you're trying to go. Like I can't get Tony Robbins on the phone. I don't have that. I don't have that kind of juice. But if you're a podcaster like me with 100, I guess of today, 178 subscribers, I need to talk to somebody like you because maybe you're even multiple steps beyond me. And that advice that you gave to me that was gold, which I've never heard anybody say it the way you said it before. And as soon as you said it, I mean, it was like a hammer hit me. I was like, I know this guy's telling the truth. I know this is right. So you're doing exactly what I'm talking about right here. Find somebody who's a little further down the road that's still relatable, that can still break down the process of how they got there. Because Tony Robbins doesn't remember sleeping on his friend's couch. I mean, he's got some vague memory, but he can't kind of get me the recipe from to move to point A to B because he's all the way down at Z. So that's it. Don't be afraid to ask. And I encourage people connect with me on YouTube, on LinkedIn, Facebook. I'll tell you anything you want to know for free because I'm just selling books. That's it. If you buy a book, that's great. If you don't buy a book, I'm probably going to help you anyway because I want to be that Mike Dry for you. I want to be that Robert Lane for you. And if enough of us just team up and come together, we'll reach our goals. We can't do it alone. So the lesson would be reach out to a mentor that's at least one step ahead of you. And number two, we can't do it alone. We have to grow our network. We have to deliver value to our friends and help each other grow. It can't just, most people get on social media, they get on podcasts. It's me, 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 me. And then when you so graciously asked me to come on the show, I subscribed to your channel. I followed you on LinkedIn. I looked at you on Facebook, but I think it was only add friends, but I couldn't follow you. So anyway, out of respect, out of that reciprocity for your invitation, I'm going to follow your stuff. I'm going to engage with your material. And I think if more people did that, that understood that ebb and flow and that give and take, we'd be fine. We don't need thousands of people. We need about 100 really, or 36 to 100 really good friends that just keep pushing. And we'll break through that algorithm because if enough people are liking and sharing, and we'll break through, algorithm can't stop us if we team up. So that's my message.
Right. My thing is, I always wait until after the interview to do all that in case we have a bad interview. Now I gotta unsubscribe from your channel. So no, I genuinely wait, especially because I've subscribed to someone and then they're a no-show and ghost, and it's like, okay, thanks for nothing. But yeah, I think an important distinction I want to make for some people because this is a big issue in our industry. Make your coworkers, so people who are guests on your podcast, vice versa, make your coworkers cheerleaders, not clients. Because so many people try to clientize their, if that making up words here. So many people try to clientize their coworkers. I've had people who guest on my show and then try to get me as a client for their $1,000, $5,000 program or something. I think it's insulting and disrespectful, and we can't just buy each other's products and stuff. But I think that online engagement, that support, that collaboration is so important. So cheerleaders versus clients, I think that's an important distinction to make because some people get the wrong idea. I like that you said battle buddy, and I have to agree with the always seeking help. And the issue is people want to do it on their own, especially people like you and me who have unofficial, undiagnosed ODD, and we're entrepreneurs and we want to do it all by ourselves. But I'll tell you from personal experience, when I got out and I decided to make my podcast a business, because it was originally just going to be a comedy with a couple of nuclear operators, and then I was the only one there. So it was a solo act, and so we ended up pivoting into mental health. But, you know, I paid a bunch of fees and business creation things that I found out in my stay are actually waived for veterans. But I paid them because I didn't do research. I didn't speak to anyone about it. I did very minimal research, and I didn't go to a veteran business owner and say, hey, I'm thinking of starting a business as a veteran. You've already done it. Are there any waivers that you know about for people like you and I? A lot of the podcasting lessons I've learned was through trial and error. But there's so many conferences for podcasting. There's so many podcasters that all I had to do was reach out and say, "Hey, I'm thinking of starting a podcast. I would love to avoid the pitfalls." And one of the things that I've started saying that I might make a T-shirt for is I shared on an event the other day that our look back is their ahead. And so, what I believe is an important part of mentorship and curating the new generations is providing our look backs. And that doesn't mean everyone's going to listen to it. There's plenty of things my parents told me that they went through that I was like ignoring that. And then I went through it and I was like, oh man, I should have listened. And I doubt we'll ever get to a point where there's not a generation that says, man, I should have listened to my parents. I think we're always going to be hit with that. But I think once you're past that part of your life where you can develop that mindset to ask for the look forward rather than have it put on you. I think that's a big thing is seeking rather than being told. You'll have a better understanding in implementation of it. And that's kind of goes into as well as a parent when it comes to the faith and parenting. I always put forward teach, don't tell. And that's a big thing I learned in the military as well as you get told. You don't get taught. And there are people in the military who think if they curse at you extremely and aggressively and tell you to do something, you'll suddenly know how to do it. And some people do that as parents as well and as mentors. So I think asking, and I think one thing that you and I have hit on a lot is alignment. Make sure you're asking people who are aligned with your mission and goal. People who have done it aren't always aligned with you. There are people who have done it through their own methods, which may not be aligned with you. People have done it. Listen, I've talked to some people who ranked up in the military. How they did it? By screwing over other people, by being dirty. So make sure that alignment is there when you ask. But I think that's great advice is to ask for advice. And that's why I always try to cultivate life lessons from the guests on my show to provide that to people because people are afraid to ask or they don't know to ask. And sometimes, again, the classic saying, you don't know what you don't know. And so I think it's important to always be intellectually curious and always get the other side. But Mr. Gaines, I think it's been a great conversation. I do want to leave people with who should read your book. I know you've mentioned it a couple times here, so just really who would benefit from it and who should read it.
Sure. I would say anybody they want to break away. You feel like you're a prisoner of the cubicle and you want to escape, but you have no idea where to start. And there's a lot in there about and I'll just tell you too. So the book is really good if you have no idea what to start. So I talk about entire business concepts. I talk about how to launch products, how to launch services with money, with no money. It goes through a whole lot of different scenarios. Again, the book is mainly just about how to come up with the idea. What happens after that? There's a lot of great books about that, but and I haven't found any. There's no book about how to create the idea from scratch. So that book answers that question. And the follow-up book, which has no title just yet, is going to be about LinkedIn and marketing. So really, it's almost like a two-part thing. Once you get the idea, then you can start to leverage those relationships to bring it into fruition. But yeah, anybody who wants to break free but not sure what to do, that book, you go through it, you'll have a few ideas. And I'll also tell you that your first idea is probably don't hang all of your hopes on it. Look at me. I started with a mastermind group, launched a podcast, then the book, and next year you might see me online. I might be doing something else because I'm going to
Brazilian
keep
bikini
trying.
modeling.
I might descend into total madness and give into the Instagram butt model thing. Who
Right.
knows?
Nothing wrong with a man in a speedo.
But there are good ideas and there's
Right.
bad ideas, and I'll give you just one tidbit from the book that might help your audience understand how powerful the content in the book could be. Most of the time because people know I'm kind of in that space, so I get pitched ideas all the time. Robert, I have this idea about this and that and the other. And most of the time, the ideas that come to me are competitive ideas. So like the whole reason why the book came together is because this guy wanted to start basically a miniature version of Amazon. He was going to have 20 products, 20 to 30 products, and then he was going to hire all these influencers, and then he was going to scale it up from there. Pretty good idea in theory.
Mhm.
And then when we got in, we realized we couldn't buy the products cheap enough for him to make money and the influencers to make money. But having a competitive product is the hardest thing in the world. There's ways where you can have complementary products and
Mm.
companion products. That's much easier. Nobody talks about it. The book is full of it. Then I give examples about, let's say you're into sports and you're going to go to, well, let's just say a sports event. You're going to go watch some college football. Well, I talk about what people buy before, during, and after they buy those football tickets. And I get people thinking to engender this diagonal thinking where everybody else is just, how do I do a new McDonald's hamburger? How do I break all of that down? What if you already know a transaction is going to happen? How do you get before that transaction? What do you buy before you buy tickets? Well, if it's an outdoor event, you might buy a scarf, you might buy a sweater with the team, you might be thinking about branding, and that's not going to be done on the ticket site. So you can position yourself as that before this particular purchase. And then what are you going to buy at the same time you buy that event ticket? You're going to buy parking. So then you can coordinate your marketing with the people. So anyway, I won't go on a deep dive on here, but there's some pretty intense. I'm not going to say I'm not the greatest writer in the world. And I think anybody that reads the book would agree, but the material is solid. I stand by the material. My ability to write like Hemingway is not there, but the information is quite impactful.
For sure, and we're gonna have that in the description below for people to check out, as
Thank
well
you.
as once your LinkedIn Guru Guide comes out, we'll add that in there as well for people to check out. I think that is super important, and they go hand in hand together, especially if you're trying to grow a business or you have this idea, now you need to build a network for it. So I think they work together very well. They complement, they don't compete. So, Mr. Gaines, it's been great talking to you. I'll have you on the show again for sure, and I look forward to seeing what you do in life, and I appreciate your time today.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you. And I invite you to come on my podcast as well. We can get deeper on any of those topics you want. Thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of your day.